and welcome to Together Unlocked, brought to you today by Together 2012. I'm Jude Gosling, and with me in East London is Julie Newman, and in Birmingham, or should I say Sutton Coldfield, we have Robin and Josh Surgener, and we'll be coming back to you all in a minute for a bit of introduction and audio description. But for those of you who are new to the show, just to explain a little bit about us, Together 2012 was founded in March 2013. We'd organised under the auspices of the UK Disabled People's Council a volunteer-led, disabled-led arts festival connecting local residents with and indeed international visitors with the London 2012 Paralympics. And to our surprise, we were asked to carry on and set up a full-time project. So we now run a whole series. Well, in usual life, we run a whole series of events, screenings, performances, all sorts of different things, culminating in a month-long festival in Disability History Month, which starts in the middle of November. And we also have an outreach program. So again, usually on a Monday to Friday morning in East Ham, we have free creative workshops for disabled artists and anybody who wants to give it a go. If you're interested in the practicing regularly, then you're an artist. And if you're new to the arts, then we hope to persuade you today, because one of the things we're going to do is talk to you about our web-based Join In From Home program. But first, over to the Surgeoners in Sutton Coldfield for a bit of an introduction and some audio description for anyone who can't see them.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the beginning of another lovely week of being at home and staying safe. And, as we know, getting creative. So I'm Robin Surgener. I am the business director at Together 2012. I don't know why I always hesitate when I say that. And I actually live up in the West Midlands in Sutton Coldfield. And just so as you know what I look like as well as what I sound like, I am 56. I have increasingly long hair, but I'm mediumly shaved, if such a thing exists today. I have no rimmed glasses, wearing a black polo shirt with the word Angry Fish written on the left breast, which is my stage name and my disability arts company.
And why are you a fish?
Why am I a fish? Because I've been called a sturgeon many times, and I was a swimmer, and I'm an angry fish because sometimes people have frustrated me, politically speaking. Over to you.
I'm Josh Surgener, also in the Sutton Coldfield office. I'm a PhD student the majority of the time, but a little bit kind of stuck at the moment with everything being closed. I'm 24, I've got blonde hair, although it looks ginger in this light, which is upsetting.
It's ginger.
And I'm wearing a blue and white Rugby World Cup shirt from the World Cup last year that England very unfortunately lost in the final.
And you're both involved in coaching sports still, aren't you?
Yeah, we both separately are swimming coaches at various clubs, and then we also have a swimming consultancy performance company together as well.
Yeah, and we are keeping up as much as we can, doing online land working sessions, which we are calling simulations. Well, it's a mix. Some of them are straight land work, and some of them are simulations where we're kind of putting sets of exercises together in a way that sort of mimics the elements of swimming a particular stroke.
Yeah, people are often surprised that there's a crossover between sport and the arts. They said to us when London 2012 was on, why are you doing an arts festival? But there's always been an arts component in the Olympics. In fact, I believe they used to have knitting competitions back at the start. But the cultural programme is really what brings everybody together. But lots and lots of people who enjoy sport enjoy art and vice versa. So we're really pleased to have that crossover. And it would be strange to be a Paralympic cultural legacy organisation without some Paralympians. Now, Julie in Canning Town, let's have an introduction from you this Monday afternoon.
Hi, I'm Julie. I'm the chair of Together 2012. I have silver and gold hair. I have a. Sorry. Sorry, over to you, Ju.
Um, what was that, lovely? I was just saying if you put your microphone a bit closer to your mouth. But yes, you have beautiful silver and gold hair. You have a lovely green rimmed pair of spectacles. You have an interesting white T-shirt with "Choose Love," which I believe is Amnesty International.
Yeah, for refugees, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's a good moment to actually think about how horrendous it must be to be a refugee at the moment, whether you're in a camp in somewhere like the Greek islands or indeed in some kind of very, very overcrowded accommodation here at the moment, because I understand people are really suffering. But finally, I'm Ju Gosling. I'm an artist who also works under the strange name of Ju 90, which was a name that was given to me many years ago, actually, well over 20 years ago, by a friend who saw me video editing and joked about me being like Joe 90, and then I became Ju 90, something I've often regretted, but will stay with me for the rest of
No, you see, I think it's really good. I mean, particularly having been a Joe 90 fan, being old enough. I mean, probably most of the people going, "What's Joe 90?" I could sing it. We just could Joe 90, very kind of 60s synthie pop stuff.
Oh yeah, do me my own theme tune, because let's face it, we're going to have enough time to do that. All of us living in isolation, we're all wheelchair users. Fortunately, we have home studios, and Julie has moved in for the duration. So, for as long as anybody out there is in isolation and watching, we will be doing this show. Not, however, on a bank holiday. But before I come on to the bank holiday, to describe me, I'm 57. I've got short red tenured hair, although, of course, it's not quite as short as it was a few weeks ago. I've got black rimmed glasses, and it's a bit hard to describe my t shirt actually. It's a white t shirt, and it's a kind of electronic circuit print in silver and a rather fetching maroon, which I suspect was originally given to me by my friend Roisin in Ireland. Hello, Roisin, if you're watching in Dublin, because we like to buy each other silver shiny presents, and I think this was one of them. It's also been quite challenging, as somebody who usually wears a lot of black, to realise that, of course, that doesn't really show up very well on the internet if you're doing live streaming. And behind us, I should say, for anybody who can just see some of it but not all of it, we have a very wonderful graffitied banner that says Together 2012 and has lots of symbols on it of different things that we do as an arts organisation. So there's a microphone for our live performance, there's a clapperboard for our film work, there's a camera for our still photography work, there's a disco ball, there's drama masks, there's a painting easel, and now I'm getting neck ache, so I will leave it at that.
I was going to say, and finally in shot in the our end of the sofa, for those that can see it in the background, is a drum skin with a fairly vicious looking fish on it, which is a former drum skin for my band, Angry Fish. But my brother-in-law, who unfortunately is no longer with us, was a drummer who played from his wheelchair, and that was the drum skin that he had on the front of his kit. So I've kept that for sentimental purposes.
Well, interestingly enough, it almost looks like there's three of you on the sofa, because the webcams and their autofocus is such that the drum skin is in slightly better focus than you guys are. But After what you said about the shaving, maybe it's a good thing. Maybe it's a bad thing. So, for anybody who was watching on Friday, we had a bug on the open broadcasting system, which meant nobody could hear us, and we had to sit there and engineer for the boys who coped magnificently. But there were few little bits that we just wanted to come back to from East London. And the first one was that we were going to be or Julie was going to be talking on Friday about May Day as International Workers' Day. And that seemed to be news to you two, which as trade unionists, albeit retired trade unionists, shocked us. So, Julie, particularly as we're celebrating key workers all of the time, would you like to tell us about International Workers' Day?
Well, only from the research that I've done recently, plus my own experience, as Ju was saying, as a trade unionist. In 1886, there was a massive strike for an 8-hour day in Chicago, in Illinois, in the States. And it was picking up the initiative from Australia in Victoria, where some stonemasons had started to demand an 8-hour day. And it met with massive, massive resistance. And during this particular, what's called the Chicago Haymarket massacre, over 200 people were either killed or injured, police and civilians. As a result, the police rounded up some ringleaders, and I think 4 people were hanged during a trial, which was very, very iffy, and were subsequently pardoned. But they were treated as martyrs. I think everybody was so shocked by this because I think those who were striking for it, were fighting for it, were really struggling for an 8-hour day. It seems so sensible. And it just seems so illogical to have such level of resistance and anger against it. International workers came together, and in 1904 it was formally declared that May the 1st would be International Workers' Day. This has been adopted by virtually every country in the world, interestingly enough, and it's taken sort of different levels of time for it to be formally adopted as a holiday. But even the Catholic Church has adopted it as a holiday, sort of as Saint Joseph, who's a patron saint of workers. Interestingly enough, the Internationale, which was the sort of anthem picked up by the international workers, one of those sort of strident, cheering songs, sort of like inspiring sort of solidarity and marching together, has also been picked up in all languages throughout the world. And during the student uprising and the subsequent massacre at Tiananmen Square, as a response, there were over 1 million people there, and they started to sing the Internationale, which I think must have been so moving. Every time I think about it, I get sort of like goosebumps on my arms. I just think, wow, that's just amazing. I think it's interesting. Why is it relevant today? I think it's fairly obvious why it's relevant today. There's certainly social care workers very often have 0 hours contracts, which means they can be dropped just like that. And they have no workers' protection. When we look at the National Health Service and those who are sort of in public health in any way, the lack of personal protective equipment, I think, has been quite shocking. And I think it shows how the impact of a value system which isn't fair or equitable has appalling consequences. I think one of the reasons why in this part of the town in London, in East London, why we have such high levels of fatality from the virus is linked into poverty and, again, inequality. If people don't have a starting point of health and well-being, education, food, food bank usage is horrendously increased, and there's so many people who can't even use a food bank. You know, the level of food poverty amongst children at the moment is phenomenal, and it's obscene. I consider it to be quite obscene.
And I think it's worth just pointing out at this point, if you do live in Newham and you're disabled and you need some help, well, in fact, if you're living in Newham, full stop, if you need connecting to food banks and what is actually a very well organised community and council partnership system, then email Noel, Noel, at together2012.org.uk. Noel's our engagement support worker, and in fact, if he had better internet access himself, he would be coming on this show on Monday to be doing all sorts of really sort of dealing with those kind of queries. So, yes, we do, despite, as Julie says, having some of the worst health, worst poverty, and now the worst mortality rate from COVID-19, there is actually a really good, well organised system out there. So, email Noel, Noel, at together2012.org.uk, and we will do our best to put you in touch with people who can help. Certainly nobody in East London now should be going hungry, and there's a very big drive on now for welfare benefits advice. So thanks for that, Julie. I'm trying to remember when it became a bank holiday, because it was a workers' national, it was an international holiday for many, many places before it came, but I think Julie's just looking it up.
Yeah, I mean, in fairness, I think I've only ever known it as Labour Day, just never heard it called International Workers' Day.
Yeah, I think in London, well, maybe London's more of an international city. I don't know, because I don't know the West Midlands that well. But yeah, it's generally called work down here. In days when there was a lot more money around, there was quite often a TUC sponsored festival, which was
All right. Well, our resident researcher has just found out that May Day became a bank holiday in the UK in 1978.
Oh, so more recently, or no, earlier than I thought, and I didn't realise it was that long ago. However, this year, the bank holiday has been moved to Friday. And again, we kind of enjoyed watching you struggle as to why there was a bank holiday on Friday, but Julie has looked it up.
Oh, we know now too.
Well, I won't put you on the spot. Julie, why is it a bank holiday this Friday?
VE Day, Victory in Europe. And as far as I'm aware, is that right? Yeah. It's again, very, very important that we don't forget World War II. And I think people like me, baby boomers, I was born just after the Second World War, often get lambasted for living in the past. But I think what happened when the liberation troops marched into Europe and what they discovered was something that we should never, ever forget. The genocide, the camps, they were just appalling.
I think the reason it's so important this year is because it's the 75th anniversary of the ending of the war in Europe. And actually, talking about community, I mean, lots of people kind of locally here are having no contact street parties. So where they're, I mean, it sounds lovely for us that our drives are far enough apart to be 2 meters apart. But for example, we live in a cul-de-sac, which means that we can stand kind of outside our house and still have appropriate social distancing. And the idea is that people are going to play music and bring their own food out, but kind of try and deliver some of that community spirit and what would have been the celebrations around VE Day that would have been nationally, more prolific.
Yes, and there's going to be some communal singing of We'll Meet Again. And a couple of weeks ago, we played a very lovely version of We Meet Again, which is a film by Act Up Newham. It's embedded. If you are watching this from our website, then the next link down, there's a highlights page of different films and things that we've shown here. And Act Up Newham's We'll Meet Again is embedded in that. And also, if you're on YouTube, just look for Act Up Newham's stream and We'll Meet Again is there. Yeah, I think it would be lovely to be having virtual street parties, but you're right, it's far too kind of crowded here in East London, and I think also, of course, the infection rate is far too high as well. But I think, having said that, I think people will still, as much as they can, if they're not actually clearly ill or in mourning, I think people will have a good weekend. It means a lot to, East London has always been very keen on this kind of thing and very keen on street parties. So we might have a street party just for us, our two assistants' dogs, and our five cats. Perhaps not all in the same room. There needs to be a little bit of social distancing between the cats and the dogs. But we've blathered on long enough, clearing up a few things from Friday. I will come back to Folk in Motion because on a Monday we would usually, if we were operating as usual, on the second Monday of the month we would be doing a photography and film club, and on the fourth Monday we would be doing dance and theatre. So these are the art forms that we talk about on a Monday. But before that, we've got a film sent in, and please, all of you, send in your photos and films of the projects you're doing at home. This is a second film. We had one last week from a local actor with Down syndrome called Ellen Goody. So the challenge now is to see if it will work the way it should work.
The river Thames, it's blue and wet. It runs through London with boats on it, sailing away. It's too dirty to swim. It's too dirty for swimming. It runs under a bridge where us people walk over. It's just the River Thames. Underneath the river, seaweed, fish swimming. It's a part of London. It's just the River Thames.
And thanks for that, Ellen. And indeed, we do have the River Thames not very far away at all. And where we are in London, it's a very big River Thames. In fact, if you're not in London, or indeed if you're London but you can't imagine where Canning Town is, if you look at the map on the front of EastEnders, you'll see a sort of U shape of the river. And that U is the Isle of Dogs, and then it goes right again with some long blue bits, which are the docks, and we're above that. So almost bang in the middle of the map. Thank you for that, Ellen. So Ellen is a member, I believe, or no, used to be a member of Act Up Newham, who are our associate drama company, who are sending us lots and lots of content. But Ellen, like a lot of the participants in our club's program, is working from home, and we were very touched last week to discover that at least one of our club's participants is setting herself up every morning and doing the things that she would be doing at the workshop. And I think we talked a bit last week about how hard it is to try and have some structure to life. And it's not very hard for me at the moment because I have to remember that Monday, Wednesday, and Friday we have to try and make all of this work and live stream. And also, it's a highlight for us to be able to be social and see into somebody else's home, because we haven't seen anybody apart from through doors for about 6 or 7 weeks. I think I've lost count, but we did go into isolation about a week before the official lockdown. We just shout things through the door like, please don't block the gate and thank you very much. We say thank you very much through the door a lot because we get a lot of deliveries. And then there's the challenge of the people who put them up against the security gate, so I can't actually open it to take it in. And that's about as much of the outside world as we see. But on a Wednesday, we have Nature Watch with Precious Newman, which is where we send Julie's assistant's dog out into the yard with a camera strapped to her. So we do still keep in touch. So we talked about our Join In From Home program, and looking at Eleanor's Ellen's film is a really good example of, just get your camera, get your phone out, switch it on, show us what you're doing. We'd love to see it. But we do have a really comprehensive program. If you go to our website and click on the Join In From Home program, there's a series of activities that links very closely to our year round clubs program. So today we're just going to think about things like film, dance, and theatre. Our dance club, which usually meets on the fourth Monday of the month, specialises in improvised dance for the screen. And what that means is that we have a whole range of people. We have people with long term health conditions, mental health difficulties, learning difficulties. It's hard enough to get together on a Monday, but it's not really possible to get together for lots of rehearsals. Performances can be particularly challenging if people's help isn't available, their wheelchair breaks down, there's no transport, etc., etc. So what we do is really, really focus our creative activity on the time that we're together. So we improvise, we film what we're improvising, and unusually we wear masks because for various reasons people decided that as well as it being easier to perform on screen, they would prefer to wear masks and make people focus on the movement rather than the facial expression. So they have a very interesting series of masks, and our dance club Join In From Home activity is to make your own mask, do a little dance, film it, and send it to us. And the best ones will actually be screened in our film festival, which we'll tell you a little bit more about in a minute. There's a link on the page to the very first film the dance club made, where they spent 20 minutes with paper plates and pens and things and made some really, really simple, basic masks, wrapped themselves in some backdrops we had in the room, and just swayed to the music. And it was so effective. You don't have, really, particularly once you've dressed up and put a mask on, you don't have to be athletic or gymnastic or even move a great deal at all. You can still make a really effective film. And we've been talking about home film techniques a lot over the last few weeks. And something we were talking about last week was the sort of built in effects that you can get. And again, if you're going to do something really, really simple, sometimes just adding a really a little built in filter so it suddenly changes the color or it turns it into black and white can be a really interesting way just to make it that more effective. Wouldn't you say, Josh and Robin?
Yeah, no, absolutely agree. And like you said, there's a number of filters that are just built into phones or kind of free to download apps that you can, black and white filters or kind of sepia and different things, play with the tone and shifts the kind of different amounts of blue or red or green or whatever you want to kind of play around with. But you can also get kind of filters or kind of free apps that will turn it into drawings, kind of pencil sketches, oil paintings, kind of animated cartoon, any kind of manipulation you can think of. Really, there's probably an app or a filter that can do it.
And I was going to. Oh, go on. Sorry, Jay.
Do you go through the App Store to find those ones and presumably free ones, or do you tend to do an internet search so you're not dependent on the App Store?
In terms of if you just want to just kind of play with the colours themselves, those filters are just kind of built in to, if you're using an iPhone, because that's what I have, they're just built in. In terms of some of the more kind of complicated things like turning it into sketches or paintings, I'd kind of typically just go to the App Store and put in, there's a category of kind of photography apps that are filtered with kind of paid and free that you can flick through and just kind of take your pick out of those.
I think I'm lucky enough is that I've got my own resident teacher. I was just been doing a couple of some videos for a church thing where I'm just doing some audio recording and then videoing them as lip sync, so they put together separately for being sent out. But actually, we talked last week, for those that might have been watching, about the introduction to smartphone filming course from Arc Media. The link, I believe, is now on the website. But I took the time out to actually look at it, and so I can actually say whether I thought it was good. And actually, I think it's really useful. It's a little bit quirky because it says it's 45 minutes long, but what it is about 45 1-minute films. But each film is kind of titled, and it takes you through from knowing nothing about what a smartphone film is through to, you know, quite complicated stuff. And each little film has a title. So if you want an introduction to sound, you can just kind of scroll through and find the film on the introduction to sound, or what is a tripod, you know, and things that some people will think, well, I don't need to know that. We'll just go past it. But actually, for those people who is you know, it's a really, you know, their first step into any of this, it's kind of really good. And because they're such short films, it doesn't need you to have to remember loads and loads of information or be scrolling backwards and through a 45-minute YouTube video to find what you want. So actually, I thought it was pretty useful.
Yeah, I think what we'll do is we'll put the link up with today's program on the highlights page as well, so that people don't have to scroll through to find out where it was last time.
Yeah, good plan. Good
But
plan.
there is also, and I think it's on the program for the 24th of April on the highlights page, there's a whole clip that we've taken out the show where we're talking about smartphone techniques. I mean, something I find can be really effective is just adjusting the exposure. So the film we were talking about, where the dance club made their first masked film, they were just moving around in front of this slightly dirty and tatty community centre curtain that was covering up the furniture store. But by pushing the exposure, they appeared to be in a completely black studio with lovely bright costumes, which has had the other, and I found that with still photography, if I've had to try and fake a studio shot, what I tend to do is take an old white sheet out into the yard where there's really bright light, photograph it against the sheet, and by pushing the exposure again, I kind of lose all of the folds and things in the sheet, and it appears to have this lovely bright white background. So some of my apparent kind of wonderful kind of studio set exhibition shots are actually in the garden with a sheet and a lot of exposure adjusting. I mean, Julie, you do a lot of filtering with your iPad with still photos and videos, don't you? What do you tend to do on the iPad?
I suppose that depends on what the product's going to be. You know, what am I doing it for? Who am I doing it for? Am I just trying out an app just to see what the limits are? And also, I think it's quite legitimate to do that. I think particularly you have to be a bit careful with some of these apps, because they have inside them they have these paid for bits that you don't necessarily see initially. So you start off quite happily doing something, and then you hit a block and you think, oh, why isn't that happening? And it's because you have to pay. So, you know, sort of it's worth playing around before you want to do something seriously, just to make sure that you've got an unhindered passage to take your work. I think the one that I use a lot, because it makes an interesting product, is Waterlog, which is completely free. There's nothing to be paid for on that. And why I think it's interesting is because you can have a range of subjects. You know, so for example, I could have a landscape, and I could play with it on Waterlog, so it comes out. Although it was the one particular landscape I was thinking of was taken on a spring morning, comes out looking as if it's in snow, which is quite interesting. Um, and if you take a portrait, again, that can come out quite an interesting outcome. But it's really it's having a think about what you want to do and why you're doing it, and what you're going to do with the end. I mean, I don't necessarily do anything with the end product. I just put it into a little portfolio. But just thinking about film, we had an experience at the weekend where we were sort of all joining in using one of these applications, these Zooms. I think just a basic thing which really irritated me at the time, but not in a horrid way, but just was a little bit of an irritation, is if you're doing something like that, put your phone sideways. You get a much better picture, and you can prop it up easily on its side. In fact, more easily on its side than you can on its bottom.
Yeah, I think we talked last week as well, didn't we, about using pillows and soft cushions as phone stands if you were filming. I was talking to Hannah from Act Up, and Hannah was saying that they also use Zoom if somebody wants to record themselves doing something, but either doesn't have the dexterity to be able to film themselves on their phone, or yeah, it's just too much for them. What they do is they use Zoom, and then they operate Zoom, and whoever wants to record their little video does it at the other end, and then they just record the Zoom meeting and output it like that. And in fact, you can use Skype. I mean, Zoom is free as long as you don't want to use it for very long, or I believe it. I'm not sure you can record, but Skype is free, and you can record Skype up to. I think you can have 4 people on a call at once and record all of them, and then download them as separate streams. So yeah, if you want to make some things, but you've got a smartphone, but you don't really know how to do it, and you've got a techie friend, you can actually focus on the performance and get the techie friend at the other end to focus on the recording. It's almost like having somebody to help with the production in the same room, but not quite. And they're using Zoom. I think that's how they're using Zoom for all of their rehearsals, but also to create the pieces that we've been screening. So that if you look on the highlights section and look at the Act Up films, a lot of them, you've got different people in the same shot at the same time, and that. But whether they're focusing on one person or not, that's all been filmed off Skype.
I think, and going back to what Julie was saying, is I think in the same way that some people have kind of stage fright and can't ever imagine themselves singing outside, and won't even sing at home. People get like, it's my photo. I can't mess with it. What if people see it? But actually, make a copy of your photo, and you're the only one that ever needs to see what you're doing with it, or a film or whatever. Your computer, unless you take it online, is a private place. And you can mess about with your photos, change the colors, change the balances, do whatever kind of things that you want to do to it, and it's entirely just there for you to look at. If you make something you want to share, brill. But I think this idea, the ethos of joining in together at home is actually have a go. Don't think, oh, I'm having a go because I need to send it together. Just enjoy doing it, and if you make something that you think, oh, actually that's pretty cool, then send it in to us.
I think that's absolutely right, Robin. And it's about doing something for the sheer joy of it, isn't it?
Yeah.
I use an app called Snapfish. I've downloaded it onto my iPad, and using Snapfish, I get 50 6x4 prints a month free, completely free. All I have to do is pay for the postage.
Wow.
I haven't done it for a while, but I have been able to try out, say for example, a waterlock image, look at it on my screen on my iPad and think, well, that looks nice, but I wonder what it's like in my hand. And actually getting it printed through Snapfish, although there are obviously other providers that could do the same thing, but I happen to use that one. The quality of the print is excellent, but it makes it quite real having something in your hand sometimes, and also it's an opportunity to create a gift for a friend.
Yeah, I mean, Snapfish advertising at the moment, so I'm assuming they'll deliver. We'll put that, and was it Waterlog, the app? So again, we'll have those links on the highlight page. It's particularly good to talk about film today because on Friday we opened the submissions for the Together Disability Film Festival. The Together Disability Film Festival is the UK's only international disability film festival. We work very closely with the types of festivals that do also exist. So, particularly with Oscar Bright in Brighton, and Oscar Bright is a festival that takes place every 2 years, and that's for films only by filmmakers with learning difficulties. So, we will always showcase their work as well. But we're very proud to lead on that. It's usually the second weekend in December, but this year, for various reasons, it's going to be the first weekend. So it's going to be Friday the 4th to Sunday the 6th. And we will be launching on the 3rd, which is also International Day of Disabled People, with a whole series of 2 days of Zoom workshops aimed at filmmakers, both disabled and non disabled. We always have a 2 day workshop for filmmakers at the start of the festival. Usually it's on one intensive subject. So we've done things like audio description, poetry film, I think indeed dance film, animation. I think that's going to be too much this time. So, what we're going to have is a whole program of different events and panels for filmmakers. The festival, fortunately for us, is always partly virtual because we like to think we're pretty much ahead of the curve. Don't know about flattening it, but we're certainly ahead of it. So, on the Friday of the festival, because it always opens on the Friday night and runs through the weekend, we republish the program with links to all of the films that are also available online. So they might be available publicly on YouTube, or we might have filmmakers that send us a private link that you can only get to through our program. This year, everything will be online, so we will be streaming it through this site. We will have the program available as usual if you don't want to watch in order. We will have, like I say, more events, in fact, because we have Zoom and we can do more things. So we're really looking forward to that festival. It's completely free to enter, and I should say that in real life, everything is as free as this show. When we started, we realized that money is just as big an access barrier as anything else. So we are committed to making sure that everything we do is free at the point of use. So you don't have to pay to enter. We introduced awards for the first time last year. We have the CAT Awards, which are named after the late Catherine Aronello, who passed last year and was a wonderful artist filmmaker. And this year, as well as the awards for, well, I think we have 8 different awards, including Best Drama, Best Documentary, Best First Film, Best Dance Film. We're also going to have a special award for the best film on the theme of home, and that is our photographers and filmmakers activity on the Join In From Home program. Make a film about home. It can be a comedy, it can be a drama, it can be a documentary, it could be a video diary, it could be an animation. But whatever it is, make it on the theme of home and send it to us. On our website, under 2020 program, you will see all of the details about how to enter. You do not have to be a professional filmmaker. It could be your first film, it could be a film you've shot on a smartphone. I mean, we were saying, I think last year's Turner Prize winner or the year before, I think it was the 2018 film winner of the Turner Prize. Everything was shot on an iPhone. We've had some super films coming in on much cheaper phones than that. So you may well be, and we certainly always screen films by wonderful international feature film directors, but it may be your first film and it may be a film on an iPhone or a much, much cheaper phone, but we would love to see it. The earliest we will be looking at films, I think the early bird deadline is the beginning of July. What we would like to see this year is people entering much earlier than usual, but I know that's going to be quite challenging because, of course, it's going to be very hard for anybody to complete things. However, I know that there was lots of films being made at the end of last year, so I am very much hoping we will have as good a selection as ever. So that's the Together Disability Film Festival, 4th to the 6th of December, in entirely virtual, and we should have some rather exciting news to be announcing about that later in the year in terms of other opportunities. I think I'm going to hand over to Robin to say something at the moment because my mind's gone a complete blank, as it so often does.
No, it's absolutely fine. And I think this, the filmmaking, the idea, going back to what I was saying, that, anyone can make a film who's got a smartphone. And obviously anyone who's got other cameras, lots of the ordinary, what you think of as stills cameras, digital cameras can make short films on them, short burst films, which can be bolted together. There's a whole, manner of ways, and you don't have to be George Lucas, or, some massive, like, super imaginative brain that you've got to create a whole 15-story log before you start making your first one. Just go out there and film something, and as we're saying, enjoy it.
Can I just come in here, because I think you're absolutely right, Robin. It doesn't have to be all singing, all dancing, or all anything. In fact, thinking about the theme of home, it doesn't even need to be your home. It could be an imaginary home. What they say, home is where the heart is, and it could be like a remembered place. It could be a place that you'd like to go to. There are no boundaries, effectively, and I think, Robin, you're absolutely right. I think it's an opportunity now to be playing around with this technology, because hopefully some of the pressures are off. But I think, you're absolutely spot on, Robin. People have this opportunity to take it, for goodness sake.
Yes, and I think it was really important what you said about you don't have to share. There's a sort of inevitability if you come to a real live workshop that people are at least going to sort of look at what you're doing.
Yeah.
Although, having said that, on a Tuesday we have an art club which has a real focus on craft techniques, things that anybody can do, but you can also use within fine art. So we've done everything from lots of different work with wool to decoupage and plastic clay modeling and so on. And we tend to pretty much do the same activity, but all in a sort of different way, of course, because we're not sort of trying to work towards making one perfect object. We're trying to make things that are very individual. But it's very, very chatty. Whereas on a Friday, we have a drawing and painting session, and that's very much for people to just come in and draw and paint whatever they want to. We've started introducing a still life option. And I think that's a really good thing to think about in lockdown, because we talked a bit in the past about you suddenly have a sort of burst of creativity, or maybe you don't have any, but the rest of the time it's just feeling very, very pressured. So being able to do something where, yeah, you're just experimenting, you're just doing it for you, put as little pressure on as possible, but have a think about doing something different that you haven't done before.
Yeah, I think kind of, we've said a lot, play around with these and experiment with these, and it's just kind of like you said, if you don't know where you want to go, or you're trying something new, just play around. If it comes out and you end up making something that is excellent, then great. From my own experience, messing around with sliders on Photoshop and things, sometimes I'll take something that was okay and it turns out, when you play with all the photos in it looks rubbish when you finish playing with it, and then you learn kind of what went wrong. And I think, if you are going to be kind of playing around with filters, or if you are kind of editing films, something that I've learned, or kind of always try to practice, is always make duplicates and edit the duplicate. Never edit the raw kind of master file, because if you do something horrendously destructive to it and you can't figure out how to get back, you haven't then lost your original kind of footage or file. So if you do something kind of irreprehensibly wonky, you can just kind of pop that one in the bin and then get a fresh one.
And I was going to say that just the idea of mixing or editing. One of the things I learned as a sound engineer is actually play with taking things out rather than putting them in, which might sound really strange, because if you are trying to add a particular color, you are going to have to add it. But with sound, often people think, oh, there's not enough bass, got to turn the bass up, and then they turn the bass up, and then they can't hear the treble, and end up everything's turned up to here, and you still can't hear anything. Whereas actually, if you can't hear the bass because there's too much treble, turn the treble down rather than the bass up, and try and find what's hidden. And sometimes you can do that with, again, we're thinking about photos, is take a bit of, only look at a small bit of it, and try and minimize what you're looking at, and take away the things that you think are in the way to find the picture inside. I mean, there are great philosophers that will tell you that sculptures are always inside the stone that they come from. What it takes is a great kind of an artist, a discoverer, to find that sculpture within the stone. And I think that's the same within photographs.
I think it is, but I think for anybody out there who doesn't have great manual dexterity, which of course would include me, sometimes just hitting the auto button, you can go into something like, there's a program called Preview if you're on a Mac, and I know there's a PC equivalent, but I can't think what it is, and it just automatically shows your pictures and your PDFs, and you can go into color correction and press auto. And sometimes it looks much worse, but very often it looks better, but it does only require one click. So even if you're using your nose, it's a kind of relatively easy thing to do. One of the things that I was just thinking back with the art club and setting up the still life, because if you're not feeling very creative, it can be easier just to focus on the still life. I think you can do that for film if you want to just shoot some footage in order to have a play around, but you're not really feeling even creative enough to know what to shoot. Maybe just pile some stuff on a table in front of you, shoot round it, practice with different, you can point different lights at it, you can switch the top light on and off, you can open and close the curtains, and you can just experiment and see what's going to give you the clearest color and the best focus, because lighting has a lot to do with how well the camera can focus, doesn't it? And just how much information is in the picture. But again, I'm a great believer in auto settings. I remember back in the 80s when the autofocus first came in on the still cameras, and I was really insulted when they said to me, well, why don't you try this new camera? We know you came in for a second-hand one, but we haven't got what you wanted, but this has got autofocus. And I was like, I don't need autofocus. I know how to focus. And then you realize just how much quicker it is that no human eye can ever compare. And ever since then, I've been like, okay. So with Photoshop, I'll often try all of the automatic options first. Sometimes it really varies. Auto levels is a lot better than auto smart fix, sometimes doing things in different orders. So yeah, it's strange how even with the automatic stuff, you've got to play around a fair little bit. But we're galloping towards 4 o'clock. So I wanted to flag up that on a Wednesday, we would usually have our pop-up poetry club at East Ham. We're still, and I say this every week, still working towards a phone system that will simply do what we want, where we can phone you and you can join in by phone and we pay, and you don't have to phone and put in loads of code numbers, which we know is impossible. But we have an activity on the website, which for the Pop-Up Poetry Club, which is write a poem on the theme of togetherness. And we're going to be publishing a whole anthology of those in the autumn, ready for the festival. And Mr. Robin Brooke has written in with a poem, which I'm going to read before we finish. But I think first, if we want to go round and just say a final few words and anything else about what we're going to be seeing on Wednesday.
Okay, I'll go first. I mean, I'm always prepared to have a poem on a Wednesday. It'd be quite nice, maybe if anyone's got any questions they'd like to send in on how do you start writing a poem? What is your start point? And again, almost like we've just been talking about the editing, is for some people, I don't know how to write a poem. Well, let's talk about that if that's something that people would like to hear, because it'd be really great to kind of get even more community involvement. We're going into the community, but we'd like some of that community to come back to us with some questions that we can answer, and then you can start producing your content to send to us, or more content, I should say. So, and that's kind of it for me for now till Wednesday. Josh?
Yeah, no, kind of similar things with, kind of if people do have questions around kind of poetry or writing or photography or sound or any of those kind of different things, I think between the four of us, we have most of those things covered, I think, to a pretty good level. One thing I just wanted to kind of jump back on on a technical point. I know, Drew, you mentioned around kind of filming with Skype and Zoom. Because I checked while we were doing it, you can record on a free Zoom account, and you kind of one-to-one can be however long you want it to be, or if you have more, up to 100 people, it's a 40-minute time limit, but that's both kind of free on a Zoom account. You don't need to kind of have any subscription to access those. But no, that does it.
That's really helpful to know. And what is it you'll be reporting on a Wednesday as usual, Josh?
Yes, so we'll have a quick chat around kind of sport or what's going on in sport, or potentially going on,
or not going on,
or not going on. Yeah, depending on what we can find. And then we also kind of normally have a chat around kind of gaming and activities and things that you can be doing at home. Here's our winning Teddy, to try and kind of keep yourself entertained as lockdown continues.
We have our own little virtual sport. I would say it was a bit of a laugh, but the Surgeon family are very competitive, so I think they take it a bit more seriously than that. We're taking part in the virtual bear hunt, so we've got different bears, or some of us have got different bears up each week, and some keep the same bear up till they've won a medal. And we compete for the right of our teddy bear to wear a medal by some clockwork toys in a virtual Paralympic sprint. And as we've said, we will also have virtual nature watch with Precious Newman. So I think that's a good time to turn over to you, Judy.
Thank you. Yes, absolutely. Thinking about Nature Watch, maybe take the opportunity to look at some I don't know, some sites that have got nature in it. The BBC website has got Countryfile. There's a RSPB site with birds on it. Think about butterflies. There's a butterfly conservation site. And maybe take some inspiration of that ahead of Wednesday, thinking about poetry.
And quite often cameras have got what they call macro settings, haven't they? They might be illustrated with like a drawing of a flower, and it means that it will focus really close up, because I think some of us, as close as you get to nature, might be that ant crawling across the windowsill, but it is still possible to film it. And in fact, somewhere on the Together website, I think in the Vibrations project material, which we might talk a bit more about later in the week. But yes, when we were based at a community centre in Stratford for our club's programme, we came in one morning and discovered the great ant invasion, and we had ants marching in squadrons, 3 or 4 deep, the entire length of the hall, around the kitchen, through the cupboards, and so on and so forth. And I ended up filming that originally just to report it to the council, but it ended up becoming one of our performance pieces. Surprise, surprise. So yeah, it's amazing what you can do, even photographing the ants. But on that note, I will say a goodbye from me, a goodbye from Together 2012. And this poem is by Robin Brooke. COVID-19 may be a time to weep, or a time to mourn by some. By others, it may be a new time has begun, a time we realise we're in isolation, but we're not alone because we need to help someone, or the helping each other has now begun. We may have woken up to this fact that's been known by some, but we were conditioned to believe this was wrong. My hope is that the time we remember this will be long, because by helping each other in community, we become strong. Try to remember the birds in the trees still sing their song. Without so much pollution, the ozone layer is a healing one. Given a chance, Mother Nature is strong. This is a chance if we take this one. Please don't bow down or crumble in fear. Somehow, remember who's near. Pick up the phone or email someone. As joined together, we are stronger than just being one. And Robin adds,
Thanks, Robin.
laugh, love, and just be yourself. And I think that is a really good note to finish on. So it's goodbye from East London.
And goodbye from
Bye.
And we'll be back on Wednesday at 3 o'clock.